Thank you. Ooh, loud one. All right, guys, we're gonna keep this super tight. So to start off, why don't everybody give their introductions? I'll go first. I'm a general partner at Credit Neutral, which is a venture fund investing in protocols, infrastructure, and SaaS.
Test. All right. Hey everybody, I'm Louis Hahn. I work at Coinbase and I'm the head of developer sales, essentially, which is externalized infrastructure, APIs, and SDKs. And a big part of that is staking.
Nice. Hello. My name is Adrian. I go by ADCD. I'm the head of finance at Lightodel as an independent contributor.
Hi everyone, my name is Mara Schmid. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alluvial. We provide institutional staking services to custodians, exchanges, and other participants in the market.
All right. So ETFs recently got approved. Obviously, everybody's super hype about them. They're coming online. But of course, they are launching without staking, at least in the United States. And so this is obviously something that people are very keen to change. And so my question is, to start us off, is like, how will that change happen? Will the SEC change their stance? Will the issuers make a concerted push? Or will we need to wait until November to get a better idea of how the market will develop? Whoever wants to go.
So I think probably worth noting that while the spot ETFs got approved in the US, you actually have ETPs and ETFs with staking approved in other market jurisdictions as well. So Switzerland, for example, or Canada, where you have issuers that already provide these structured products with staking included in their offerings. So one of the things that I think most issuers in the US expected is that staking would not originally be included in the approvals. In all other market jurisdictions, vanilla ETFs went through approvals first. There was a lot of dialogue with regulators, and after a time, regulators got comfortable approving staking as part of these vehicles. I think one of the interesting dynamics that we observed with the launch of the Bitcoin spot ETFs was just how competitive and large that market can get in a very short period of time. And so what I think issuers are going to be looking to as they think about incorporating additional yield and staking inside of their products is making sure that they're competitive and performing to attract the most participants and users of the market. And so staking is an excellent way to incorporate that and attract more capital into these products.
I think on the Swiss point is an interesting one because it's a jurisdiction that has, by regulation, people who use a voluntary sort of buy-in pension can allocate up to 5% of their pension allocation essentially to crypto. And I think you have to, as an issuer, sort of take a step back and wonder sort of who you're building the product for and who the ultimate audience is, and sort of why you would invest through an ETF versus through any other venue, whether you could go to Coinbase or have a wallet and just buy crypto instead. And so I think, rather than sort of focusing on, adding staking ETFs and ETH ETFs and so forth from a sort of, somebody else is going to come in and buy my bags, I think it's important to think about, from an institutional perspective, the type of customer segment that these products are aiming at.
I agree with something that Mara said, which is the competition side, right? One of the things that I think is going to be pretty pertinent in the ETH staking discussion, when the Bitcoin ETFs launched, the main thing that they competed on with each other, because most of the products are pretty similar, it comes down to the fees that they're taking, right? So you saw this incredible race to the bottom on fees, people taking 25, 30 bips, and on the ETH staking front, it's going to be different. There will be fees involved, but then it'll also be how much of your underlying assets are you able to stake, and they will be competing on yield as well. So I think that is a very interesting part of the staking ETF. And then to answer your question directly, I do think that we're waiting on regulation to be clear in the US specifically, because we have a regulator currently in the SEC that believes that staking in and of itself may qualify as a security and so on and so forth, and that's going to be a big part of the conversation in terms of when can we see and expect staking to be implemented.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because to Mara's point, these other ETFs in these other jurisdictions launched as vanilla ETFs to start, And then through dialogue with regulators to help them understand exactly how staking works and the risks associated with it as well as the benefits, people were able to come to the decision that yes, this should be included in ETF products because it makes sense and is ultimately beneficial for consumers. And so it's quite hard to have those honest and open dialogue and conversations with a regulator that does not believe in these concepts of honesty and openness. And so, we all agree that at some point ETFs in the United States will have staking, just like the ETFs outside the United States. What do you think will be the initial approach for these ETFs? Like, do you think they're going to start with, no staking first, then vanilla staking, then other things? Do you think they're going to jump directly into something that is maybe a little bit more interesting? Super curious to hear how you guys think that decision tree will evolve over time.
Sure. I think, again, we can probably draw some learnings and analogies from jurisdictions in which these products effectively have emerged over the last 1 or 2 years. In most cases, issuers went to market with vanilla staking products, started to understand the considerations and the risks. I think what Louis touched on is right, in that issuers are going to be looking for two underlying components when they select their architecture stack. The first one is going to be security and risk mitigation. So some of the variables and some of the panelists that have spoken to this before us actually pointed out that networks like Ethereum have things like correlated penalties, and so there's sort of this push to running multi-operator technologies on the back end, and so you slowly start seeing the migration of issuers from single operator architectures to multi-operator architectures to build towards a more resilient and security preserving stack. Then the second component is performance, and so when you think about ETFs that incorporate staking within their vehicles, we're not talking about a couple of bibs anymore that people have been, moving on the Bitcoin side to garner a lot more consumer participation. We're talking about percentage points that people are leaving on the table by not having sufficient or high enough opt-in rates to compete effectively, and I think that's where sort of this transition point happens, where issuers are already starting to look at alternatives that provide liquidity to secure higher opt-in rates, call it 35%, 65%, eventually going up to 90%, and the technologies that enable that. And so at Alluvial and through Liquid Collective, we're building one of these solutions that allow issuers in the market to leverage a liquid solution that is both compliant and institutional grade to integrate inside of these products and vehicles.
And I think if you look at the case of European staking ETFs, for example, the industry is definitely in its infancy, like Mara alluded to. You have issuers who are typically using sort of native staking providers, and the structure of these products tends to be sort of cash redeemable, open-ended ETFs. And historically, even in the sort of equity space, this variety of exchange-traded product typically faces substantial amounts of redemption risk, or risk of redemption runs, especially in periods of sort of peak market volatility. And this is just an equity, so you can only imagine what the volatility is like for a crypto product. And similarly, I also think that when you have native staking, a lot of these issuers are not even necessarily, in my view, taking risk in the form of like slashing or operational slashing or what have you, where I believe that, personally anyway, I think the evidence shows that the risks are largely overstated relative to sort of what people feel is probably more the case. I feel like in these issuers, the risk that's more prevalent is the redemption run risk, right? So, liquid decentralized solutions are certainly a tool that's available and can still faces similar levels of redemption risk, but it's a different nature and it's more quantifiable relative to having to sit in a withdrawal queue, for example.
I agree with both of them. One of the things in terms of when you think about how are these products going to come to market and how are they going to evolve, you have to understand that first there will be a spot ETF that has no staking. So you already have a product approved where the entire underlying asset mix is a single asset, which is Ethereum, and it's all in liquid form. From there, I think when the regulators get comfortable with staking as a concept, you're going to see what happened with the other jurisdictions where native staking will probably be added. And due to the T+1 redemption requirement that's in the United States, I think you'll see people start to stake 20, 50% of their underlying asset and then keep enough liquid so that they can meet those redemption requirements. And then over time, we hope to see more sophisticated solutions in terms of how to help them stake more of that underlying asset risk while still meeting that T+1 requirement. And there's a number of ways that can be done, but it still remains to be seen what will be possible in terms of what the regulators will approve.
I see. And everybody's talked so far about staking, different ways to do it, and also maybe the amount of assets that you can stake. But we're still at the end of the day talking about a relatively straightforward staking product. However, obviously, these much more enterprise customers, have needs aside from they require a full package, not just vanilla staking, right? So I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what are some of the other requirements that they have, whether it's on reporting, security, certifications, and any other kind of packaging that makes this much more appealing and useful product to them.
Do we have some fixed order? Okay, so I can probably speak to a couple of value propositions and customer needs that we hear in our conversations with different issuers. There's obviously some of the mandated requirements that issuers will have when they think about how do they custody their assets. In most cases, participants will choose what product to use based on the custodians, the qualified custodians, or the bank chartered custodians that they use. And so having integrations with qualified custodians and access points for those products is very important, and one of the areas that we focus on, providing multi-custody access through our product. The other things I think that folks care about and we hear about a lot is understanding operator distribution, security practices, being able to assess counterparty risk, understanding how to really quantify that in order to run through risk diligence and processes. And then I think last but not least for us, obviously the reporting elements, making sure that both registration, reporting, and routing are effectively incorporated in a single product. And so I think over time, hopefully, a lot of these solutions become more sophisticated to serve these customers across a very broad range of custodians and market participants.
I would simplify it to an extent. I think staking is a complicated topic. A lot of issuers come from a traditional finance background, and they're not typically used to a lot of the sort of language, how it works, and so forth. So I guess but really they're sort of building the same thing, which is a financial product, an exchange-traded product. And fundamentally the needs are sort of around liquidity, diversification, and performance. And here, I think we recently published a research note actually on our website where we looked at some of the economic aspects of integrating a decentralized solution such as Lido State ETH as part of an ETF vehicle. And what we found is that State ETH as an asset was very highly correlated to the CME ETH front month futures market, which is a very useful feature for authorized participants when they want to hedge, subscriptions and redemptions. And then State ETH on centralized exchanges, for example, trades in hundreds of millions of dollars on a monthly or even sometimes weekly basis with very, very tight spreads at very deep order books. And this is something that's very useful because it shows that there's a sort of real, organic, and fair and free market. And this is a useful consideration for participants who are trying to legitimize an exchange-traded product based on an asset that shouldn't be susceptible to sort of fraud or manipulation, or where these attempts can be detectable easily. And then the final one is, from a performance perspective, we sort of show how Lido's inherent distribution of validations and reduction of counterparty risk as a result means that the exchange product built on top of it can reflect a fairer and more accurate snapshot, let's say, of the overall Ethereum industry rather than being concentrated in sort of one or two or three or four node operators. So I think all of these economic considerations are probably first and foremost in mind, especially for something like an exchange traded product where the interaction with the consumer is on a different level than necessarily just that asset.
Yeah, these types of products really, the discussion originates from where the tokens are held primarily, right? So that, like Mara alluded to, that typically lands with a qualified custodian, and then simply put, they need access to ample market liquidity so that they can work within their redemption requirements. And then on the staking provider side, a lot of them either want assurances or some kind of way to disclose risks for slashing coverage in some shape or form. And then also a lot of them ask about risk diversification as in regards to cloud providers, geographic regions and jurisdictions, client diversity, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. You guys made a lot of great points, and I noticed that somehow many of the points you made point your product in a very favorable light.
Coincidence.
By pure coincidence. And so here before us, I'm going to put all of you guys a little bit on the spot. There's three, obviously very different approaches between, Alluvial, Lido, and Coinbase for how to enable staking, right? And as far as the services that are part of that. And so the challenge I'm going to give to each of you, and we can go to any order. Mara does not have to go first for the 7th time. But the challenge that I'll give you is I want you to make a strongman argument for why ETF issuers should adopt your approach or adopt your solution, right? But then I want you to make a counter argument against your product. Why wouldn't they adopt it, right? And so, okay. You want to go first? Let's go, Lewis.
Sure. So, as I said previously, and Victor alluded to, I set myself up nicely for this one. So the discussion really begins with where those tokens are held in custody, right? So that begins with the qualified custodian. And at Coinbase, with Coinbase Institutional, Coinbase Prime, I mean, if you were paying attention to the Bitcoin ETF launch in the United States, I believe we won 11 out of the 13 from a custody perspective on the Bitcoin ETF. That really comes down to the fact that we're a public company. We have public and audited financials. One of the core things that the ETP providers are looking for is they're trying to underwrite the risk of their counterparty. They're trying to underwrite the financial risk of working with you as a counterparty. And whether that comes to custody or the way that you're operating the validator infrastructure and so on and so forth, that's one of the core components that they need to be able to do. So Coinbase is uniquely positioned to do that very well and give the regulators and the issuers a sense of good warm fuzzy in terms of their comfortability in working with us. And then also with Coinbase infrastructure, through the QC, we have integrated staking providers that are diversified, not just with Coinbase validators, right? Through the QC, you can also access other staking providers, so you can diversify risks that way. We are also natively integrated to Liquid Collective, so you can integrate that way. So whatever options come down the line to bolster that staking product, then you can access it through the qualified custodian. And then obviously the reporting piece, we provide robust reporting and so on. So I think it's a very easy decision for them to underwrite the risk on Coinbase in the way that we're operating.
And why shouldn't they use Coinbase?
The argument for why shouldn't we use Coinbase, typically the strongest argument for that is being a publicly traded company, being a public company. We tend to take our time, be very careful. So if there are things on the bleeding edge of technology, things that are very nascent and things that are incredibly innovative, we may be slow to adopt those or integrate those into our systems, right? Because there's a lot of hurdles that we have to go through before we add things and jump on new capabilities. So if you're really trying to be on the bleeding edge of certain kinds of things happening in the industry, then sometimes those won't be baked into the Coinbase offering and integrated to the qualified custodian vehicle. But with that said, typically in this discussion, we're talking about traditional finance products being brought and crypto joining that, so I don't see that being as big of a problem.
Right, I'll go next. I think it comes down to the point I made earlier, where fundamentally these issuers are building products and they're hoping to build them for a specific market segment, and these products need to be performant. So you need liquidity, risk diversification, and product performance. And when it comes to sort of custody, Stake ETH is a crypto asset. It's an obvious sort of first choice for many issuers. It's a market leader in staking. It's a top 10 crypto asset. Depending on the price of Ethereum, occasionally it flips USDC, which I'm quite happy about whenever it happens. It happens a lot lately. Going up and down.
Hopefully not for much longer. Come on, stable coins.
And so I think the fundamentals are there. I think we have quite a detailed analysis on this on the depth of this market liquidity. I think this provides a substantial reduction on, or an ability anyway to mitigate the risk of redemption runs, which is one of the first and foremost things that these issuers care about. As an asset, it's listed on qualified custodians. Regulated entities use it regularly. There's no particular barrier, frankly. So there's a counter argument, I suppose, for why they wouldn't use Stake ETH. It occurs to me that maybe in most instances it might just be because they haven't heard of Lido, and it's just not something that has occurred to them. It might not have been offered to them as part of a menu of options. Lido is notably not listed on Coinbase, the exchange, so unless I'm mistaken. I do believe you can custody that. So I suppose, as an alternative, a centralized staking provider could offer things like trappings of that people are used to, like a person on the other end of the line. Like, there's definitely an area where you can dive up, where you can differentiate as a staking provider in regards to the level of service that you offer. Lido Stakes Ether is just software, so it has no service. People choose to use it, or they don't. And people build products on top of that. So.
These have both been very good and very fair answers on both sides. So Mara, take us home.
So why would people choose our product? I think we're probably today the only specialized enterprise-grade distributed staking solution with liquidity built in. What that means concretely is we partner with companies like Coinbase, and Lewis gave a very compelling argument as to why you would want to hold your assets there, why you would use their infrastructure. We do both. You can access our product natively through Coinbase, just like you can through Anchorage, Fireblocks, Copper, Vanilla, or other solutions in the market. We've taken a very diligent approach to recognizing some of the needs that enterprise-grade and institutional customers have as it relates to compliance, counterparty risk, and security, and we've implemented that natively into our offering in a scalable way. And so I think those are really the reasons why customers choose to partner with us and use our product. I think probably warrants in terms of the perspective of why people wouldn't be using our product. I think the reality is that the market is still very early. I think one of the reasons why liquid staking products are not natively integrated into a lot of US solutions is because regulators are still behind the ball in understanding these products, the risks, how they mitigate them. And so we, I think collectively here, have a lot of work to do to advocate and educate those participants in the market to help innovation really drive better performance and security for all users of the market.
Well, can we get a time check? How are we doing?
22 minutes, you're at 22 minutes right now.
Okay, so I have 3 minutes left. Okay. No? Am I over?
No, you're good.
It's casual. We're keeping it casual. No one's going
Leaving in this range.
Yeah, no one's going anywhere. You're stuck here. Alright, so I have 2 questions. I'm going to say both of them, and you can only answer one, so just pick the one that you want. So we only have 3 minutes. So the first one is, when we talk about institutional adoption of staking, in some ways that could be scary for the decentralization of Ethereum, right? And so the question is, like, should people be worried? Like, is this a problem, or is this something that's going to play out in a totally fine manner? Or should we be worried about censorship or forks? So that's the first question. And the second question is, as you're thinking about the future of staking, right? Both with institutional adoption, both with middlewares such as, Opal, with DBT and Eigenlayer, VebBoost, and all that stuff. You guys have all been around for a long time. What does the next 5 years of staking look like? What are some of the big changes that you expect to see, whether it's a technology or process or words based or whatever it is? So there's 2 questions. Everybody pick one and let us know what you think. And we'll start with you.
What was the question? The first question on whether we should be mindful about let's phrase it like this: is there a danger to Ethereum's decentralization as a result of institutional adoption? I certainly think there is. I looked recently at the Bank for International Settlements bank transfer volumes for 2022, and in 2022, large value payment systems, so excluding retail, excluding commerce and so forth, booked $1.5 quadrillion of transfer volume. Like, I didn't even realize this was a number. So there's definitely a huge space, and Ethereum is still a very, very small part of it. And I don't think that the industry is frankly prepared for what could happen when these quadrillions of dollars end up flowing into 1 or 2 node providers. The security of Ethereum fundamentally depends on many factors, but ultimately Ethereum's value derives from its security. And part of the security, one of the factors that drives the security is the decentralization of its validator set. And it's very important to keep in mind some of the sort of soft coercion and soft pressures that exist as institutional adoption grows. Like, to the extent that it uses decentralized staking middleware, this can be a net positive for the industry as it distributes concentration across many different node operators, and more so with DBT and other technologies like this. But for example, and not to name names, but Coinbase, for example. Sure.
Could have said Kraken, but okay, fine, we'll take Coinbase.
So Coinbase has the advantage that it's a public company. It's a very big advantage. It's a very good for transparency. But at the end of the day, it's still a public company, and it faces the same fiduciary obligations that any company does. And although it's obviously a very positive actor for the industry, recently, for example, they stopped reporting the amount of staked ETH that's staked in Coinbase, which was an important data point for myself, because otherwise there's no way of actually knowing. And this is not to pick on Coinbase, actually. Like, they are a good actor, and they're just a company at the end of the day. But this is sort of to illustrate that, you know, companies have pressures. Or recently, the ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority, suggested in a public consultation document, out of good faith, like their mandate, if you believe that they are acting in good faith, and I certainly believe they are, they want to protect the market from market manipulation, and they wanted to suggest that MEV was a form of market manipulation, and that validators, as a result, may have to register as broker-dealers. And this is an example of the type of misunderstanding that happens when, you know, things get badly explained, when, you know, regulatory capture from corporations plays into trying to influence the way that people educate about how staking works and so forth. So I think it's very important to bear this in mind, because, you know, we don't want to end up with Ethereum concentrated in sort of 3 or 4 companies. It would frankly lose all of its value.
I think it's really good. No, that was all fair points. So one fun fact for you, that paper, so our policy team has actually responded to that paper, and I was the guy that wrote the MEV response. So what they included as a paragraph, I had to respond back with it in 5 pages, kind of like arguing for, you know, why things should be a different way. But okay, Mara?
I'll maybe respond just to Adrian directly on some of the commentary. So, do I think institutional capital entering the space is net bad? I think absolutely not. I think everyone in this room wants to make sure that crypto goes mainstream, and that is a big component of making sure that we mature this industry holistically across all segments of the market and continue to evolve the sophistication of the solutions that are available. I think one interesting point, I've worked in staking now for many years, but in 2021, when Ethereum had just launched, Ethereum's decentralization was a lot worse, arguably, than it is today. You had literally 70% of the network run by 3 operators in the market. That was effectively what was going on at the point in time. I think since then, we've seen new market needs emerge. One of them initially was the need for receipt tokens or liquid staking tokens to provide better capital efficiency. That solution, Lido, Rocket Pool, and others in the market were able to capitalize on that, driving new capital, contributing to the decentralization of operator sets and the stake in the network. And I think the same thing is true for institutions. They'll bring new market needs. Those market needs will need new products. Those new products can attract and distribute more capital, right? And I think in many ways we're still super duper early in an industry that I think over time will continue to act on the capabilities of decentralizing as a result of really diverse customer needs and different solutions that can cater to those across the board.
Awesome. All right. So when I think of decentralization and institutional capital coming in, do I think it's a risk or bad? Absolutely not. I agree with Mara. If we want Ethereum to achieve the dream that I think all of us sitting in this room had, we have to achieve mass adoption. And one of those things is institutional capital flowing in, legitimizing the industry, and then providing products back to the people in the forms that they use it, right? And not everybody is a self-custody wallet user. I think it's a very small percentage of the world today. And a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So in my mind, it's a hugely beneficial thing for the industry. And then when you think about decentralization, it's a very loaded term. People talk about decentralization all the time. One of the main problems that decentralization is solving was solved when the protocol was born. It's inherent in the protocol design, right? The problem that protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum were solving is the centralized nature of the decision and ability to impact the supply of the money, right? And that was ripped out of the hands of the central bank when these protocols were born. So on that very important decentralization point, that one layer, right, that problem has been solved and it will never be unsolved, right? So the issuance of the Ethereum token will never be in the hands of one central party, and that's incredibly important. Now, there are other layers to decentralization, right? But what gives me a lot of hope and fills me with a lot of confidence that we shouldn't be too concerned about this is recently, with the risk of the supermajority risk on Geth, right? You saw the community come and rally on Twitter and so on and so forth. We have proven that we are a self-policing community, and when we saw these things that could potentially impact the health of the Ethereum network, the community stood up and essentially called each other out, and we all pushed to bring that supermajority risk off the table, right? So now a lot of the major node operators out there are operating on Geth and Nethermind, and the consensus and execution client diversity looks a lot better. So in that way, I think because the protocol is so transparent and people can see on chain what's happening, we tend to police each other. I have a lot of faith in the community in that way. And then also when you talk about centralization risk in terms of staking providers and node operators, at Coinbase we have a very hard rule that on any given network, especially something like Ethereum, we will not run more than a certain percentage of the network. We just won't do it, right? So in that's the reason we diversify the staking provider options through the QC and so on. So we will never get past a certain point where we hold a majority of staked ETH.
And not to say the majority of staking is the limit. Yeah, but to sum up, maybe that just brings us back to how important the community is that we have here sitting in this room today, but also the community that we're building every single day around us. And I'm thankful that we have such a wonderful cast of characters that are running so much of the infrastructure and continuing to push the industry forward. So with that, thank you everybody, and I really appreciate your time.